Grandpa, did you lose your walker on the way here? The voice cut through the barracks like a blade. Laughter exploded around me, boots stomping against the concrete floor. I stood there holding my duffel bag, heart pounding, face burning red, while 20 pairs of young eyes stared me down. The drill sergeant hadn't even opened his mouth yet, and already the wolves had their first meal. "He's older than my dad," someone whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room erupted again. I clenched my jaw, not because of the words, but because I knew they were testing me, waiting for me to break. In that moment, I wondered, was I already beaten before training even began? Sergeant Miller walked in like a storm, his hat low, his eyes sharp. He caught sight of me instantly. "What the hell is this? Did the retirement home run out of bingo cards?" The laughter doubled, and I swear I could feel every word hitting me harder than push-ups ever could. He walked right up, nose almost touching mine. "Private Collins, 38 years old. What in God's name makes you think you belong here with these kids?" His voice wasn't just loud, it carried judgment, the kind that cuts deeper than any insult. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to answer steady. "Sir, I came here to serve." He sneered. "You came here to embarrass yourself." They all heard it. The whole bay knew I'd been singled out as the weak link. In the Army, weakness is blood in the water. It lingers, it spreads, it destroys. I lowered my eyes, not out of shame, but because I had to survive this moment. Discipline meant swallowing pride, even when it tasted like dirt. Later that night, when the lights were out and the barracks went quiet except for muffled jokes and snores, I pulled out a small notebook. It wasn't much, just a weathered field journal my father had carried through Vietnam. The cover was frayed, the ink faded, but his words were still there. "Stand steady when the storm hits." I read that line twice, maybe 3 times, while the insults of the day replayed in my head. I thought about how he survived things worse than words, worse than humiliation. He had stood steady, and I had to too. But humiliation didn't wait for a convenient time. The next morning, boots were lined up for inspection, shiny as mirrors, except mine. A recruit named Johnson leaned over with a grin. "Hey, Grandpa, they didn't teach shoe polish in the nursing home?" He said it loud enough for Miller to hear. The sergeant's boot stopped in front of me like a guillotine blade. "Collins, drop and give me 50. My arms shook after 20. My chest screamed at 30. By 40, the room blurred with sweat and shame. When I collapsed, I heard Miller's voice again, calm but cruel. "Weakness has no place in my army." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I wasn't weak, but words don't mean a damn thing here. Only actions do. So I bit my tongue and stood back up, trembling, chest heaving, eyes straight. Not a sound from me. That silence, it was my shield. Not everyone laughed. I noticed Ramirez, a quiet kid from Texas. He didn't say much, but he saw me. When my gear spilled out during inspection, while others snickered, he helped me scoop it up fast, sliding my canteen back without a word. He didn't smile. He didn't want anyone to notice. But I noticed. In this place, even the smallest nod of respect was like oxygen. Days blurred into punishment, insults, endless drills. Every mistake I made, every slip, was fuel for their jokes. I ate alone in the chow hall, trying not to hear the whispers. I kept polishing my boots, rechecking my gear, running laps when no one watched. I wasn't strong yet, not by their standards, but I wasn't going to quit. And deep down I felt something shifting. Each insult burned less. Each humiliation, though sharp, started to harden me. The weight on my shoulders didn't crush me, it built me. Piece by piece I was learning what my father's words really meant. One night, as the barracks lights clicked off, I heard Johnson's voice again, mocking from the other side of the bay. "Tomorrow Grandpa won't survive the ruck march." More laughter, more stomping boots. I held the notebook tight under my pillow. I didn't know if I'd prove them wrong tomorrow, but I knew I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of breaking tonight, and what I never expected was that tomorrow would bring the first crack in their certainty, the first time silence would turn to respect, even if only for a moment. But that part of the story, that's for the next chapter. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The rain came down hard that morning, turning the training field into a swamp. Mud clung to boots, ponchos stuck to skin, and the air smelled like wet canvas and sweat. Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the downpour like thunder. "Move! Collins, you're dragging the whole damn platoon." My legs burned as I slogged through the muck, each step heavier than the last. Behind me I heard Johnson laughing, his voice sharp even over the storm. "Careful, Grandpa, don't slip and break a hip." The squad chuckled even as they struggled themselves. I gritted my teeth and kept moving. Talking back wouldn't change a thing. In this place, only finishing did. By the third lap, my boots split open at the seams. Water rushed in, and I felt every pebble grind against my toes. Pain shot up my calves, but I forced my stride to stay steady. I refused to be the first one to fall out. By the fifth lap, recruits half my age were gasping, some puking on the side. I heard Miller barking at them, but he always circled back to me, his favorite target. "Still on your feet, old man? I'll be damned." His voice carried disbelief, almost irritation, as if my endurance insulted him. And maybe it did. When we finally staggered back into formation, soaked and shaking, my arms hung like lead. Johnson smirked as he slapped my back, not in camaraderie but in mockery. "Don't die on us before chow, Grandpa." I wanted to shove him, but I didn't. Not here. Not now. The mess hall was chaos, as always. Metal trays clanging, boots squeaking on wet floors, voices bouncing off the walls. I kept my eyes on the food line, hoping for silence. But Johnson wasn't done. He accidentally bumped my tray, sending it crashing to the floor. Beans, bread, and a pile of mystery meat splattered across my boots. Laughter erupted instantly. "Guess Grandpa doesn't need dinner. Nursing homes feed him soft meals anyway." I bent down to clean the mess, keeping my face calm, though inside my chest felt like it was tearing. Outrage burned in me, but I swallowed it. I stood up straight, placed the empty tray on the counter, and walked out without a word. Silence became my armor. That night, as the barracks lights dimmed, Ramirez's voice came from the bunk across. Quiet, almost hesitant. "You didn't deserve that, Collins." His words were soft, but they landed heavy. I didn't answer right away, afraid someone might overhear. Finally, I whispered back, "Doesn't matter what I deserve. What matters is what I can take." He didn't reply, but I could tell he understood. Sometimes the smallest words mean more than the loudest shouts. The days blurred together, push-ups until my arms felt like rubber, runs in full gear, endless drills. Every time I slipped, Johnson was there, fueling the fire. One afternoon during weapons assembly, my rifle jammed. Miller's eyes lit up like Christmas. Well, Collins can't even handle a basic function check. Guess that's what happens when you've been out of high school longer than the rest of us been alive." Johnson added, "Maybe he'll get a cane attachment for that rifle." Laughter filled the bay, loud enough to echo. My hands shook, not from fear but from rage. And yet, I fixed the jam. Quiet, steady, precise. I set the weapon down on the table and locked eyes with Miller. I didn't say a word. And for once, he didn't either. The night march was the worst. Full gear, 20 miles, cold wind slicing through wet uniforms. My shoulders screamed, back bent under the pack, but I refused to slow down. Around mile 15, Ramirez stumbled, his canteen slipping from his belt. I grabbed it, shoved it back into his hand, and without a word he passed me his spare when he saw mine was empty. No one else noticed, but I did. It wasn't much, but it meant something. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. By the 18th mile, recruits half my age were falling out. Medics escorted 2 back to camp. Johnson was still moving, though slower, his jokes quieter now. Miller barked from the front, "Keep moving, ladies. The world doesn't stop when you get tired." I wanted to quit. God, I wanted to quit. Every step was pain, every breath fire. But I thought of my father's words in that old notebook. Stand steady when the storm hits. My storm was here, and I was still standing. When we finally reached camp at dawn, bodies collapsed onto the ground. My knees wobbled, lungs burning. But I stayed upright, refusing to fall. Miller walked past the formation, eyes scanning. He stopped in front of me. Collins, still breathing. For a second, his face showed something. Surprise, maybe even respect. But it vanished as quick as it came. Don't get comfortable. Tomorrow you'll wish you were dead. He turned away, but the recruits had seen it. They'd seen me last longer than most. The whispers changed that morning. Not loud, not obvious, but different. Less laughter, more curiosity. A shift, subtle but real. And then came the explosive moment, the kind that changes everything. During equipment carry drills, Johnson tried to show off, loading more gear than anyone else. He stumbled, knees buckling, and the pile of ammo cans crashed down on his foot. He screamed, clutching his leg, pain twisting his face. The squad froze, unsure. Miller barked, "Don't just stand there, get him out of the way." But no one moved. No one but me. I dropped my own load, hauled Johnson onto my back, and carried him across the field while he cursed and groaned. Every step felt like fire ripping through my shoulders, but I didn't stop. I got him to the medic station, set him down, and walked back without saying a word. The barracks that night were silent. Johnson didn't mock me. No one did. Even Miller kept his eyes on me longer than usual, as if he was reconsidering. Ramirez gave me a look, just a small nod, but it said everything. Respect doesn't come from words. It comes from action, from proving yourself when no one believes you can. I lay in my bunk, body aching, mind replaying every moment. I realized something had changed. They hadn't accepted me fully yet, but they no longer dismissed me. I was no longer just grandpa. I was the man who carried another soldier when no one else would, and that in this world meant everything. What I didn't know was that these small shifts, these cracks in the wall, were only the beginning. The real test, the one that would shatter every doubt and silence every voice, was still waiting just around the corner. The morning of the live fire drill came heavy with tension. Clouds hung low over the training range, the kind that made you feel like the sky itself was pressing down. Everyone was quiet, even Johnson. No one dared joke much when live rounds were involved. The smell of gun oil and damp earth filled the air as we lined up, rifles in hand, helmets tight, packs loaded. Sergeant Miller paced in front like a wolf, scanning us with eyes that looked for weakness, the way a hawk scans for prey. "Today," he barked, "we separate the men from the cowards. You screw up here, someone gets killed, and I'll make sure everyone knows who's responsible." We pushed forward through the mud, rifles cracking, dirt flying, targets popping up. The sound of gunfire echoed across the valley. Johnson was 2 recruits ahead of me, firing fast, cocky as always, until suddenly his weapon jammed. He froze, panic wide in his eyes. "Weapon's dead!" he shouted, his voice cracking. Miller's roar followed instantly. "Fix it, Johnson, or you're done." But Johnson's hands shook too hard, his mind locked. Before Miller could explode further, I dropped to my knee, reached over, and with calm precision cleared the jam, tapping the forward assist, resetting the chamber. Johnson stared at me, stunned. "How the hell did you—" "Keep firing," I cut him off, voice steady. For once, he listened. He fired again. Miller glared at me but said nothing, just tightened his jaw. Outrage flickered in his eyes, as if helping had somehow challenged his authority. Later that day came the obstacle course. It was the beast everyone dreaded. The rope bridge stretched across a 30-foot drop, the mud pit waiting below like a hungry mouth. Recruits scrambled across, some fast, some clumsy, the rope swaying with every step. When it was Ramirez's turn, the quiet kid who'd always given me those small nods of respect, he froze halfway across. His hands slipped, boots dangling, fear etched across his face. The squad shouted at him, "Move it!" "Don't look down," Miller screamed. "Fall and you're out." Ramirez was paralyzed. Without thinking, I stepped onto the rope. "Keep your eyes on me," I told him, calm but firm. I moved slow, steady, balancing on the swaying line. The whole platoon went silent, watching the old man and the scared recruit hanging over the pit. Step by step, I reached him, grabbed his arm, locked eyes. "One step at a time, Ramirez. I've got you." He nodded, trembling, and together we crossed. When we hit the platform, the silence broke into whispers. Johnson muttered, "Damn." Miller's face was stone, but his eyes were fire. He hated it. He hated that I had turned a failure into a victory. By the time we reached the final exercise, a combat simulation, it felt like everything had been building to this. We were told nothing except secure the objective. Blank rounds loaded, smoke grenades ready, the sound of simulated explosions already echoing in the distance. We moved as a squad into the woods, adrenaline pumping, heartbeats loud. Johnson took point, eager to prove himself again. Ramirez stuck near me, his eyes sharp, determined not to freeze this time. Then it hit, the ambush. Smoke burst, gunfire erupted from hidden towers, and chaos tore through the squad. Recruits scattered, some diving for cover, others firing blindly. Johnson yelled, "Fall back! Fall back!" Panic in his voice. Miller's voice roared from the observation tower. "Hold your ground, you worthless maggots!" But fear had broken them. No one listened. In that storm of noise, something inside me clicked. It was like the notebook in my pocket spoke through me, my father's words echoing louder. Then the gunfire. "Stand steady when the storm hits." My voice cut through the chaos. "On me! Move now!" I wasn't shouting from panic. I was commanding. Clear, steady, undeniable. Ramirez moved first, sliding behind cover at my side. 2 more followed, then 3. I pointed to the ridge. "Flank left, cover fire on my mark." They listened. They actually listened. Johnson was still shouting to retreat, but no one moved toward him. They moved toward me. For the first time, the platoon chose my voice over his. We advanced under fire, each move deliberate, each command sharp. I remembered stories my father told about patrols, about never wasting a man's life for glory. I used cover, terrain, smoke. We cut through the ambush, took position by the objective, and held. The whistle blew. Simulation over. The field went quiet, the smoke settling. We stood there, rifles aimed, hearts pounding, and I realized we'd done it. We had secured the objective, not by accident, not by luck, by discipline, by leadership, by me. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Recruits looked at me different, wide-eyed, stunned. Johnson stood apart, sweat streaking down his face, his authority shattered. Ramirez just gave me that same small nod, but this time, it carried more weight than 100 words. Miller climbed down from the tower, slow, deliberate. His boots hit the dirt, his eyes locked on me. The whole squad held its breath. He walked up close, so close I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. "Collins," he said, voice low. "Who the hell told you to take command?" I met his eyes, my voice steady. "No one, Sergeant, but someone had to." For a second, his jaw clenched, like he was about to tear into me in front of everyone. But then something changed. He didn't yell. He didn't mock. He just stared, as if he was seeing me for the first time, struggling with what that meant. The platoon was silent, waiting for the explosion. Instead, Miller turned to the squad. "You follow orders, not desperation. Today, you followed Collins." His words weren't praise. They weren't even close. But they admitted the truth. Everyone knew it. Johnson lowered his eyes. Ramirez stood taller. And me? I felt the shift, heavy and undeniable. I had walked in as the weak link, the target, the joke. But now when the bullets flew, even if they were blanks, it was my voice that had carried them through. That night in the barracks, the air was different. Johnson didn't say a word. The others didn't laugh. They looked at me with something new, respect, maybe even gratitude. Ramirez sat on his bunk, polishing his boots, and said quietly, "You saved us out there." I didn't answer. I just pulled out the notebook, traced my father's handwriting, and breathed deep. The storm had hit, and I had stood steady. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Respect is fragile in the military. One mistake can erase it all. And while I had proved myself today, tomorrow would bring another test, another storm. Still, for the first time, I believed I belonged. And so did they. The morning after the combat simulation felt different. The barracks was quieter than usual. No jokes thrown my way, no muttered grandpa under the breath. Just silence. the kind that comes when people don't know what to say. I sat on my bunk lacing up my boots, the leather still caked with yesterday's mud, when Johnson walked past. For weeks he had been the loudest voice tearing me down. This time he didn't laugh, didn't smirk. He just slowed, opened his mouth as if to speak, then shut it again and kept walking. I thought that was the end of it. But later he found me in the chow hall. He stood by my table, tray in his hands, shifting awkwardly. "About yesterday," he said, eyes down. "You didn't have to do that. Carry me, I mean." His voice cracked like it hurt to say it. I wanted to tell him what I had wanted to scream for weeks. That respect is earned, not granted, and that his mocking had pushed me further than he knew. Instead, I just said, "That's what soldiers do." He nodded, eyes heavy with something that looked like shame, and walked away. That moment told me more than words could. The man who had laughed the loudest now carried the most regret. But not everyone was ready to change. Miller, our drill sergeant, kept his gaze locked on me during formation, harder than ever. He barked orders like he was daring me to slip. "Collins, front and center," he snapped during weapons inspection. I stepped forward, stood tall. He tore my rifle apart piece by piece, searching for mistakes. "You think leading a little drill makes you special?" He hissed low enough so only I could hear. "Don't get comfortable. One mistake and you're done." I met his stare, said nothing, because silence was stronger than arguing. Around us, recruits shifted nervously. They had seen him cut me down before, but now they also knew I'd stood steady when it mattered. That afternoon, during PT, Miller pushed harder. He made me lead the squad in push-ups. "Since you're so steady, let's see if they can keep up with you," he sneered. I dropped to the ground, started counting. My arms screamed, my chest burned, but I didn't slow. I called out each number steady, clear. By 30, half the squad was shaking. By 50, they were collapsing. I kept going until Miller finally barked, "Enough!" When I stood, breath ragged, every eye was on me. Miller's smirk had slipped, just for a second, and that was enough. That night, Ramirez finally spoke more than a whisper. Sitting on his bunk, cleaning his boots, he looked across at me. "They're starting to see it, Collins. What I saw from the beginning." I asked him quietly, "And what's that?" He shrugged, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "That you don't scare easy, and that scares them." His words hit harder than any insult I'd taken, because he was right. Fear ruled this place. Fear of failure, of humiliation, of not belonging. And somehow, by not breaking, I had become something else to them, a measure. But the real shift came 2 mornings later during assembly. The entire company lined up on the parade ground, boots sharp, rifles gleaming. Captain Harris walked out, his presence heavy, his eyes scanning the formation. He was a man who didn't waste words, and when he spoke, it cut like steel. "Yesterday's combat drill was a disaster," he said, voice booming. "Half this platoon scattered like sheep under fire." He paused, his eyes moving over each of us before landing on me. "But one of you held." His words dropped like stones in the silence. Miller's jaw clenched. Harris stepped closer. "Private Collins, step forward." I felt every pair of eyes on me as I marched out. My boots hit the ground hard, steady. I stood at attention in front of him. Harris looked me over, then turned to the platoon. "When the smoke cleared, who held the objective?" His voice cracked like thunder. No one answered. He nodded toward me. "This man, the one you laughed at, the one you doubted. He led you when you couldn't lead yourselves." The silence that followed was electric. I could feel the shame radiating off some, the respect rising in others. Johnson lowered his head. Ramirez stood taller. Then came the explosive moment, the one that silenced even Miller. Harris turned, eyes burning, and said, "From this day on, Collins isn't the weak link. He's proof that strength doesn't come from age or speed or who talks the loudest. It comes from standing steady when everyone else falls apart." His words slammed into the formation like artillery. Recruits shifted, whispers started, but Harris raised his hand, and the whispers died. "Remember this moment," he commanded, "because the battlefield doesn't care how old you are or where you came from. It only cares who stands when the storm hits." Miller's face was stone. his authority shaken in front of the men. For the first time, he had no insult, no bark. He just stood there, silent. That silence was louder than any shout. It was the reversal no one had expected. The man who had mocked me, broken me down, had just been forced to stand in the same line of shame he'd always used on others. Back in the barracks that night, the air was different. Johnson sat on his bunk, quiet, polishing his rifle. No jokes, no smirks, just silence. Ramirez walked by, clapped my shoulder once, firm, and that single gesture felt heavier than any metal. And Miller? He passed me in the hallway later, eyes sharp as ever, but he said nothing. Just a brief pause, a flicker, almost like a nod he couldn't bring himself to give. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, the notebook tucked under my pillow. My father's words echoed again. Stand steady when the storm hits. For the first time, I knew the platoon had seen it too. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had been redefined in their eyes. And yet I also knew something else. Respect in the Army is fragile. One misstep, one bad day, and it can vanish. But that night, in the silence of the barracks, I felt it settle. I wasn't just Grandpa anymore. I was Collins, a soldier, one of them. And in this world, that meant everything. The final week of training felt like a blur. The days were shorter, the drills sharper, but something had shifted for good. I wasn't the punchline anymore. The barracks carried a different kind of silence when I walked in. Less mockery, more weight. Johnson kept to himself, always polishing his rifle or lacing his boots too tight, maybe as penance. Ramirez still gave me those small nods, but now they carried pride. And Miller hadn't called me Grandpa in days. He didn't call me much of anything, which said more than words ever could. One night after lights out, a few recruits gathered around my bunk. Not to laugh this time, but to ask. Collins, that notebook you keep, what's in it? For a moment, I didn't want to show them. That notebook was private, my father's words written in ink older than any of them. But something inside me said it was time. I pulled it out, passed it across. It's my dad's, Vietnam vet. He wrote down what he learned, so I wouldn't forget. They thumbed through the pages carefully, reverent almost. One line caught Johnson's eye. He read it out loud, his voice low. Honor isn't how loud you talk. It's how steady you stand when the storm hits. The room went quiet. No one laughed. No one scoffed. They just nodded. And for the first time, I felt like my father's words weren't just mine. They belonged to all of us. The next morning brought the last run. 5 miles, cadence echoing across the base, flags snapping in the wind. Miller surprised everyone by calling me forward. Collins, he barked, take the lead. The platoon froze. For weeks, that slot had been reserved for the strongest, the fastest, the loudest. Now all eyes turned to me. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of it. I stepped up, lungs already burning from the cold, and started the cadence. My voice cracked at first, but then it steadied, growing stronger with each call. Left, 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 right, left. And something remarkable happened. They followed. Every single one of them, even Johnson, fell into step. Boots pounded the pavement in unison, voices rising, echoing off the trees. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Halfway through, my legs ached, my lungs screamed. I wanted to slow, but I remembered the eyes behind me. They weren't laughing anymore. They were trusting, depending. I pushed harder, calling louder, until my throat felt raw. When we hit the finish line, soaked in sweat, gasping for air, no one broke formation. We stood together, shoulder to shoulder, the flag flapping high above. Miller walked past, eyes scanning us. He stopped in front of me, face unreadable. For a long moment, the whole platoon held its breath. Then he gave a single nod. Just that. No words. But in the military, a nod from a drill sergeant can mean more than a medal. That night, lying in my bunk, I pulled the notebook from under my pillow and traced the words on the cover. I whispered, for you, Dad, for all of us. Because I knew the truth now. Respect isn't handed out in speeches or slogans. It's earned in mud, in pain, in silence, in storms. And somehow, through all the humiliation, I had found it. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The last image I want you to hold in your mind is this. Collins, the man they mocked and doubted, standing at the head of his platoon, sweat soaking his uniform, boots caked in mud, voice hoarse from leading cadence. Behind him, every recruit stood tall, eyes forward, no laughter, no ridicule, only respect. And off to the side, Sergeant Miller, the same man who had broken him down day after day, gave a single nod, nothing more. But that nod in that moment was worth 1,000 words. Above them, the American flag snapped in the wind, steady and unbroken, just like Collins himself. That's where the story leaves us. And the lesson? It's simple, but it cuts deep. Prejudice, humiliation, doubt. They will always be there in some form. The world will test you, sometimes cruelly, sometimes unfairly. But what matters is not the insults or the trials. What matters is how you stand when the storm hits. Collins didn't fight back with anger. He didn't shout to prove himself. He proved himself the only way a soldier truly can, through action. Actions speak louder than words. In the end, those actions silenced the mockery, turned enemies into comrades, and even earned respect from a man who swore he'd never give it. It reminds us of a truth every veteran knows in his bones. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Pain shapes you. Struggle refines you. Brotherhood saves you. And dignity, when held firm, can never be taken. Now I want to hear from you. What part of this story struck you the most? Share your thoughts, your memories, or your lessons in the comments below. If this journey meant something to you, hit that like button. It shows you stand with this message. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next story we bring to life. Until then, stay steady, stay strong, and know you're never alone on this road.